My name is Victoria Hayes, and 3 months ago I inherited my father's Victorian mansion in Portland's historic district. What should have been a bittersweet gift became a nightmare when my older brother Marcus decided he deserved it more than me. Standing in what was supposed to be my new home, watching him install security cameras without my permission, I realized this wasn't just about a house. This was about a lifetime of him believing he was entitled to everything that should have been mine. If you've ever had a family member try to steal what's rightfully yours, or felt like you're fighting an uphill battle against someone who thinks they can bulldoze over your rights, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you believe justice should prevail, and subscribe because this story of family betrayal has a twist that will leave you speechless. Growing up, Marcus was always the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I spent my teenage years working part-time jobs and saving every penny for college, Marcus partied his way through high school, knowing Dad would pay for whatever he needed. The pattern was always the same. Marcus would make demands, and our parents would bend over backward to accommodate him, while my achievements were met with polite nods and expectations that I'd figure things out on my own. Our childhood home was a shrine to Marcus's mediocre accomplishments, participation trophies from sports he quit halfway through, certificates from programs Dad paid extra to get him into, photos from expensive vacations I was told we couldn't afford until Marcus expressed interest in going. Meanwhile, my academic awards were relegated to the refrigerator, eventually buried under grocery lists and Marcus's college rejection letters that somehow became my fault for not helping him study enough. I'll never forget the Christmas when I was 16 and Marcus was 19. I had saved for months to buy Dad a vintage tool set I'd found at an antique shop, knowing how much he loved restoring old furniture in his workshop. The ornate wooden box contained tools from the 1940s, each one carefully restored, and I'd spent weeks researching their history to write a card explaining their significance. Marcus showed up empty-handed, having spent his money on a weekend trip to Vegas, and casually announced he'd help me pay for my gift to make it from both of us. When Dad opened it, his eyes lit up as he examined each tool, running his fingers over the worn handles with genuine appreciation. Then Marcus stepped forward with that charming smile of his and said, "We thought you'd love it, Dad. Marcus and I picked it out together. I knew you'd want something special." I stood there, invisible, as Dad thanked us both while Marcus basked in the appreciation for a gift he'd contributed nothing to. The worst part wasn't just the stolen credit. It was watching Dad's face as he looked at Marcus with such pride, believing his son had put thought and effort into something meaningful. That night, when I confronted Marcus in the kitchen, he just shrugged and said, "You worry too much about credit, Vicky. Family shares everything." His casual dismissal, the way he said it while raiding the refrigerator like he owned the world, told me everything I needed to know about how he viewed our relationship. Even then, at 16, I knew that to Marcus, sharing meant him taking whatever he wanted while I did the work. The inheritance battle began the day after Dad's funeral. I was still wearing black, still processing the grief of losing the one parent who occasionally saw my worth, when Marcus cornered me in Dad's study. The will reading wasn't scheduled for another week, but Marcus had already made his assumptions. "Look, Vicky," he said, settling into Dad's leather chair like he belonged there. "We both know Dad meant for me to handle the house. You've got your little apartment and your teaching job. What would you even do with a place this size?" His presumption was breathtaking but not surprising. Marcus had spent the last 5 years of Dad's life positioning himself as the responsible son, visiting every Sunday with his wife Jennifer and their 2 kids, playing the devoted family man while I worked 60-hour weeks as a high school principal. What Marcus didn't know was that Dad and I had grown closer in his final years, especially after Mom passed. Those quiet evenings when I'd bring dinner and we'd sit in his workshop, talking about everything and nothing, had created a bond Marcus never bothered to build. Dad had watched Marcus's pattern of taking credit, demanding support, and disappearing when real work needed to be done. He'd seen how Marcus treated his own wife, belittling her dreams of starting a photography business while expecting her to maintain their lifestyle on his inconsistent sales income. Most importantly, Dad had witnessed Marcus's complete indifference to our family history, rolling his eyes when Dad talked about the house's significance or the generations of memories held within its walls. The will reading shattered Marcus's assumptions completely. Attorney Robert Martinez read the document in his downtown office, the words cutting through the tension like a blade. "To my daughter, Victoria Hayes, I leave my home at 1247 Elmwood Avenue, along with all its contents, in recognition of her dedication to family, her strength of character, and her deep appreciation for the history we've built together. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally rage. "There has to be a mistake," he demanded, his voice rising. "Dad wouldn't leave the house to her. She doesn't even have kids to pass it on to." The casual cruelty of that comment, reducing my worth to my reproductive choices, was so typically Marcus that I almost laughed. Attorney Martinez calmly explained that the will was ironclad, witnessed and notarized, with a specific clause stating that Dad's decision was final and not subject to challenge. Marcus stormed out of the lawyer's office, but not before hissing, "This isn't over, Victoria. That house has been in our family for 3 generations. I won't let you destroy Dad's legacy." His threat hung in the air as he slammed the door, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of inheriting not just a house, but a war I never wanted to fight. What should have been a moment of bittersweet closure became the opening shot in Marcus's campaign to prove that legal ownership meant nothing when he decided he deserved something more. The harassment began within days of the will reading. Marcus started with emotional manipulation, calling me sobbing about how Dad must have been confused in his final months, how the medication might have affected his judgment, how families should stick together instead of fighting over property. When I refused to consider signing over the deed, his tactics escalated. He began showing up at the house unannounced, using his old key from when he'd helped Dad with maintenance, walking through rooms like he was conducting an inspection. "Just checking on the place," he'd say when I confronted him, "making sure it's being maintained properly. Dad would want someone responsible keeping an eye on things." The real violation came when I discovered Marcus had installed security cameras around the property without my knowledge or consent. I found them during my second week of living there. Small, wireless devices tucked under eaves and positioned to monitor every entrance. When I called him furious, he acted like I was being unreasonable. "It's for your own protection, Vicky. A woman living alone in a house that size? Dad would have wanted you to be safe." But the cameras weren't pointed outward to catch intruders. They were angled to watch me, to monitor my comings and goings, to make me feel observed and violated in what was supposed to be my sanctuary. What Marcus didn't realize was that his intimidation tactics were creating the very evidence I'd need to destroy him. As a school principal, I'd dealt with my share of bullies and manipulators, and I recognized the pattern immediately. Marcus believed that persistence and pressure would eventually wear me down, that I'd cave to his demands just to end the conflict. He was counting on my desire to avoid confrontation, my tendency to prioritize family harmony over my own rights. But Dad's death had changed something fundamental in me. I was done being the accommodating daughter who sacrificed her own needs for everyone else's comfort. I began documenting everything. Every uninvited visit, every manipulative phone call, every attempt to undermine my ownership became evidence in a growing file. I installed my own security system, one that Marcus didn't know about, capturing his trespassing and his attempts to intimidate me. I saved his voicemails where he ranted about my selfishness and threatened to make things difficult if I didn't do the right thing. Most importantly, I started reaching out to Dad's friends and neighbors, people who had witnessed Marcus's behavior over the years, gathering statements that painted a clear picture of his character and his relationship with our father. The breakthrough came when Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor who had lived next door for 40 years, approached me with information that changed everything. She had been close friends with Dad, and he had confided in her about his decision to leave me the house. "Your father was very deliberate about that choice, dear," she told me over tea in her kitchen. "He said Marcus had never appreciated the house's history, never understood what it meant to preserve family legacy. He was worried Marcus would sell it to developers or turn it into rental units." But then she shared something even more damaging. Marcus had been pressuring Dad to change the will for months before his death, even bringing real estate agents to evaluate the property while Dad was undergoing treatment. Armed with Mrs. Patterson's revelations, I hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Marcus's activities. What we uncovered was a pattern of financial manipulation that went back years. Marcus had been using Dad's declining health as an opportunity to help with financial decisions, slowly positioning himself to benefit from Dad's assets. He had convinced Dad to add his name to several accounts for convenience, then used those accounts to pay his own expenses while Dad was too ill to monitor the transactions closely. The most damaging discovery was that Marcus had already been shopping the house to potential buyers, telling them he was preparing for an inevitable sale and collecting preliminary offers. He had contacted 3 different real estate development companies, describing the property as prime for luxury condos and dismissing its historical significance. The investigator found emails where Marcus discussed dividing the lot and maximizing profit potential, treating our family home like nothing more than a commodity to be exploited. Meanwhile, Marcus's behavior became increasingly erratic and aggressive. He began bringing his wife Jennifer and their children to the house unannounced, staging elaborate family gatherings in my backyard and acting confused when I asked them to leave. "We're just maintaining family traditions," he'd say innocently while his kids ran through my garden and Jennifer set up picnic tables on my patio. The psychological warfare was sophisticated. He was trying to establish a pattern of family use that might support a legal challenge to my ownership. The turning point came when Marcus crossed a line that even he couldn't explain away. I returned from a weekend trip to find he had changed the locks on my own house. He claimed there had been a security concern and he was protecting the property, but his real message was clear. He could take my home away whenever he wanted. Standing on my own front porch, unable to enter the house Dad had left me, I realized that Marcus's sense of entitlement had evolved into something darker and more dangerous. That night, staying in a hotel room that I shouldn't have needed, I made the decision that would end this war once and for all. Marcus wanted to play games with property ownership and family legacy. He had no idea what he was actually fighting against, or how thoroughly his own actions had already sealed his fate. The family meeting I called for the following Sunday wasn't just about the house. It was about settling decades of manipulation and entitlement once and for all. I invited not just Marcus and Jennifer, but our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, who had watched our dynamic play out over the years. I also invited Mrs. Patterson and 2 other longtime neighbors who had been close to Dad. The setting was perfect. Dad's living room, surrounded by the family photos and memories that Marcus had been so eager to liquidate. Marcus arrived with his usual swagger, clearly expecting another opportunity to pressure me into submission. He brought a folder of documents, real estate evaluations, legal opinions he'd purchased, even a petition signed by Jennifer's family supporting his rightful claim to the property. "I'm glad you finally came to your senses, Vicky," he announced to the assembled group. "We can handle this transfer quietly, keep it in the family without involving lawyers or courts." But I wasn't there to negotiate. I was there to reveal the truth that would destroy Marcus's credibility forever. "Before we discuss anything, Ari," I said, standing in front of the fireplace where Dad's ashes sat in their urn, "I think everyone should understand exactly what kind of person is claiming to deserve Dad's legacy." I opened my own folder and began reading from Marcus's emails to real estate developers. The room fell silent as I detailed his plans to demolish the house, his dismissive comments about sentimental nonsense, his calculations about profit margins and development potential. Jennifer's face went white as I revealed Marcus's secret financial activities, the unauthorized use of Dad's accounts, the money diverted to cover Marcus's gambling debts, the equity loan he'd attempted to take against the house while Dad was in hospice care. Our Aunt Margaret, who had always defended Marcus, listened in horror as I played voicemails where he threatened to make my life miserable if I didn't stop being selfish about his inheritance. The moment that broke Marcus completely came when Mrs. Patterson stood up to address the room. "I think you all need to know," she said in her clear, authoritative voice, "that your father specifically asked me to be a witness to his wishes. He was terrified that Marcus would destroy this house and everything it represents. He left it to Victoria because he knew she was the only one who would preserve what 3 generations of your family had built." Marcus's facade crumbled in real time. Faced with undeniable evidence of his manipulation, his financial misconduct, and his complete disregard for Dad's actual wishes, he did what he always did when cornered. He attacked. "You turned him against me," he screamed at me, his face red with rage. "You poisoned his mind when he was sick and vulnerable. This whole house should be mine." But his outburst only proved what everyone now understood. Marcus had never seen our father as a person deserving respect, only as an obstacle to what he felt entitled to claim. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Faced with evidence of financial elder abuse and attempted fraud, Marcus found himself not just excluded from any claim to the house, but potentially facing criminal charges. His own lawyer advised him to return the money he'd taken from Dad's accounts and to cease all contact with me immediately. Jennifer, horrified by the revelations about her husband's behavior, filed for separation within a month, taking their children and what remained of their savings. The family dynamics shifted permanently. Relatives who had always enabled Marcus's behavior were forced to confront the reality of what their favoritism had created. Our Aunt Margaret apologized to me privately, admitting she'd ignored red flags for years because it was easier than challenging Marcus's version of events. Extended family members who had barely acknowledged my existence suddenly wanted to reconnect, perhaps recognizing that I was the only one truly committed to preserving our family's history and values. I kept the house, of course, but more importantly, I kept its soul. I spent months restoring Dad's workshop, preserving the furniture he'd crafted and the tools he'd treasured. The kitchen became a gathering place for Sunday dinners with family members who actually appreciated being there. Mrs. Patterson became a regular visitor, sharing stories about the house's history and helping me understand the legacy I'd inherited, along with the property itself. Marcus eventually moved 3 states away. Whether from shame or genuine desire to start over, I never found out. He made one final attempt at contact 6 months later, a brief email claiming he'd learned from his mistakes and hoping we could rebuild our relationship. I never responded. Some bridges once burned are too dangerous to rebuild, especially when the person asking you to cross them has already proven they'll cut the supports the moment you're vulnerable. The house stands today as Dad intended, a testament to family history, a gathering place for people who understand the difference between price and value, a home for someone who appreciates the responsibility that comes with preserving the past for future generations. Every morning when I drink coffee in Dad's workshop, surrounded by his tools and memories, I'm reminded that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is not what they want, but what they actually deserve. Have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours against someone who believed they were entitled to take it? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you stood up for yourself when family members tried to override your rights. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in standing up for justice, and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family manipulation and finding the strength to protect what matters most.